Attention all parents seeking to break the chains of conformity in education. Welcome to Patterdox, where your child's mind is liberated, nurtured, and empowered to thrive in today's complex world. I'm Will Reusch, an educator with nearly 20 years of experience, fiercely compassionate about fostering viewpoint diversity and critical thinking. If you're tired of the cookie-cutter approach to education and yearn for a platform that embraces individuality, you're in the right place. Picture this, your child no longer confined to the limitations of traditional education, but instead flourishing in an environment that encourages curiosity, questions the status quo, and celebrates diverse perspectives. With Patterdox, your child will embark on a transformative journey guided by live teaching, Zoom workshops, personalized support, and a curriculum designed to challenge, inspire, and ignite their intellectual curiosity. Say goodbye to the one-size-fits-all approach and hello to the world of limitless possibilities. Join me at Patterdox and let's empower your child to think critically, embrace diversity, and become the architects of their own future. Go to patterdox.com to learn more.
Hello and welcome to the first episode of the Will Reusch Podcast, formerly Cylinder Radio Podcast. I am rebranding, as they say. Part of it is the fact that people don't know why it's called Cylinder Radio. They're so confused. They look at the logo and they go, are those knives in the background? It's like, no, this is from an old meme, like an old graphic of essentially this idea of truth. It has one side and it shows a circle and then it says, that is true. And then another side, it shows a square and it says, that is true. But the reality is that things are complex. I even say it in the intro, I have like a paper towel roll here, from that angle, it looks like a circle, kind of, it's a paper towel roll. And then from the side, it looks like a rectangle. That was the idea of Cylinder Radio. But now that I'm out of the classroom and I'm building Patterdox, or I built Patterdox, and I am essentially putting myself out there to scale good education, to further the mission that I've been doing in my classroom. I am changing it to make it more obvious that this is my podcast. So what I've built and continue to build with Patterdox. Patterdox is the online education critical thinking platform that I've built, and it's for education. So specifically like middle school and high school to help foster critical thinking for homeschool parents, but also for families that are in a traditional school system, because it's supplemental. It's not buying into the accreditation stuff and things like that. It's to teach kids how to think and how to learn. And I'm really excited to take all of the courses and the ideas that I've been developing over 17 years as a full-time teacher and expanding out across the world. And it's really, really exciting. But as I talk to people in my community, I realize that there's a lot of people that have little kids, or they don't have kids or something like that. And they also buy into this mission. So there's a whole wing that I'm developing right now called the Patterdox Roundtable. And what that's going to be is a community for people who are good faith, interested in heterodox ideas and viewpoint diversity and debate and conversation, because they're trying to make sense of the world. And the world is so crazy right now. It's so crazy right now. And I'm going to talk about that today on the episode. But there's so many cool things that are going to come on this platform. And if you've been following the podcast, you've been following my stuff for a while, I would love for you to check out what I'm doing with Patterdox. Reach out, join the roundtable when it's there. Or if you have kids, especially teenagers, definitely check out patterdox.com and reach out and see the ways that I might be able to help, because there's kind of something for everybody in the education space. What I'm going to talk about today is a lot of stuff that's happening in current events, specifically in politics. I've been teaching history, U.S. history specifically, but also government economics. I've taught all areas of social science, but government for the past, almost 2 decades. And because of that, I've been able to make sense of a lot of what's going on, and kind of going through with 6 years on social media in real time, figuring this out. There's some goofy stuff going on. And I guess I'll start with our President Joe Biden. Just yesterday, as I'm recording this, in a very important time because of the way that he performed at the first debate, which I believe was earlier than other debates. And I don't know, we put on our tinfoil hats a lot here, but he didn't perform well, let's say. And people said, he's old and he can't, do the job anymore. And he definitely can't run and definitely can't serve another 4 years. So it was a very important time. And in one day, I believe it was one day, he called Kamala Harris his vice president. He called her Donald Trump, and he called Zelensky, the president of the Ukraine, who's like our ally, Putin. So he called the person that is on his side the enemy, quote unquote, the other side. So it's not looking good. I saw like some neuroscientists are coming out who are not, political at all, saying that he's clearly degenerating and stuff like that. And George Clooney just did a fundraiser, raised something like $30 million, and it's him next to Biden saying like, give your money. This is important. This is really important. We have to defeat Donald Trump and stuff like that. And then just like a few weeks later said Biden should step down. I mean, if you donated money because George Clooney, you would probably be upset, I assume. I mean, I don't know. I don't go to George Clooney for like political advice. So that's a whole different thing. That's a good lesson to learn. If you go to Hollywood celebrities for how to think politically, then maybe this is a good lesson for you to learn. But what's going on now in the mainstream media, from the New York Times to CNN, all these people calling for Joe Biden to step down, is no different from what people have been saying since the jump, since 2020, since before. Now, Joe Biden's always kind of been like a gaffe machine. He's always kind of been goofy and not all that bright. There's a lot of examples of Obama saying, how Joe Biden, is a screw up and not very bright and stuff like that. He's always just kind of been a goofy guy. But this is different. And now they're saying the thing that all of the reasonable people, probably people who follow this podcast, have been saying for a long time. And if you've been paying attention, then you've been saying like, I don't know if they're going to let him run. There's a clip here of Joe Rogan saying this. This is over a year ago.
Don't you think that that's a ruse?
What
that him running for president? I think
you don't think he's going to run?
No. I think they're going to get rid of him. I think they're going to move him out. They're going to force him to step down. That's what I think. If I had to guess, and it's just speculation, I'd say they're setting up Gavin Newsom for it. That's what I say. That's what I think. That's what it looks like to me.
Okay, so a couple of things. I don't know if it's Gavin Newsom or what, because the donations, and there's something like they said they have like a $240 million war chest. I think there's like $90 million. The campaign donations are for Biden Harris. So even if Biden steps down, that money goes away. You can't just pivot that into, unless they change the rules, and they can always change rules and stuff like that. Like, that happens all the time. But Joe Rogan it's kind of odd, because I started listening to Joe Rogan a long time ago because he's into the same things I'm into. So it's like jujitsu, martial arts, muscle cars, hunting, all of that kind of stuff. But he has brilliant people. He's had Nobel laureates on. He has all kinds of really brilliant people on. He has the biggest media platform on the planet now, which is wild. And he talks to all these smart people. So he starts to put together these different patterns, hence, why I call it Patterdox. You put together these patterns. And because of that, he's become quite astute. And he said this over a year ago. I don't know if it's going to be Gavin Newsom. I think it's a really hard push to get around Kamala Harris. But the Democrats are in a really tough spot. And it's because they were ignoring reality. Ayn Rand has a quote, something like, you can ignore reality, but you can't ignore the consequences of ignoring reality, or something like that. Or maybe you can avoid reality, but you can't avoid the consequences of reality. I believe that's what it is. And that's what's going on with the Democratic Party, is they were avoiding the reality that Joe Biden is not a good candidate. He's too old. He's not very sharp. And they were avoiding that reality, but now the consequences are kind of biting them. And you can't ignore that. Now, there are still holdouts. It's very interesting. There are still holdouts that believe that Joe Biden is astute. I just talked to someone in my family recently who, well-educated and everything, who truly believes that it's just a stutter. They said, that's just Joe Biden stuttering. People still believe that Joe Biden is the right guy for the job. It's unbelievable, honestly. Like, it's so fascinating as someone who's a critical thinker, and I don't like Joe Biden, but I don't like Donald Trump. I think that this whole thing is so bananas. But propaganda works. It really does. And part of it is this whole Project 2025 thing. I made a video. It's on my YouTube and it's on my Instagram about 2025 because everyone kept asking me, can you explain 2025 because you're balanced and all this kind of stuff. Project 2025 is a wish list by a very conservative think tank. That's what it is. People who have worked for Trump, people who have worked in the Republican Party, okay, because that's who works for these think tanks. Left-wing think tanks, they work with left-wing politicians. But it's just a wish list. It's like a negotiation when you're at a flea market or something, or you're buying a car, okay? And they say the car is $25,000. You're like, I'll give you $3,000, and then they're like, no, okay. And then you negotiate back and forth. You end up at like, 18,000 or something. They're just putting a whole lot of really conservative things on there. It's this wish list. It's like 900-page document, and whatever they can get, they can get. But it's by the Heritage Foundation. It's not the official GOP policy. It's not the official Trump policy or anything along those lines, but it sounds really extreme. So people are scared. And when you scare people so much about door A, then they automatically blindly walk through door B. It's kind of like what's going on with gender affirming care. It has been going on with gender affirming care. It's like, if you don't transition your child's going to commit suicide. A good friend of mine, their kid, 19-year-old boy, overdosed and committed suicide. I'm a father of 3. I can't imagine something worse than losing your child to something like that, the guilt that you feel and everything. So when someone says suicide is behind door A, you blindly take door B. And that's what they have been trying to do for a long time. That's part of the game of politics, is the other side is so dangerous that you have to go blindly through my side. That's part of what Project 2025 is. And some people are definitely buying into that. But the way it looks now, it looks like it's going to be a Trump landslide. Now, I could be wrong. They all talked about a red wave and stuff like that, but it looks like it's going to be a Trump landslide. Who are you going to replace Biden with? It's interesting because, you could do Kamala Harris, which is like kind of the heir apparent, but she's very unlikable by a lot of people. There's a lot of skeletons in her closet and stuff like that. You look at what the Innocence Project said. Like, she was blocked evidence for innocent people on death row. She tried to lock up single moms when their kids wouldn't go to school. She locked up people for marijuana, like a lot of people for marijuana, while she admitted to smoking marijuana. All the stuff that Tulsi Gabbard, revealed about her, not good. But then people are saying, like, what about Michelle Obama? I talked to someone and said, like, oh man, Mr. Beast should run. I've heard, like, people talk about The Rock should run. It's like, we have forgotten that the job is actually really important. Now, Michelle Obama would just be Barack Obama. It'd be a loophole for Barack Obama to have a 3rd term, okay, which would be, against the Constitution, like in spirit, but not technically. It's like, that's a loophole. But if you say, like, just some celebrity, some likable celebrity with a good character should be president, like, the job of the president isn't just to have good character. I think that's great, and that should be an important part. Sure, Aristotle talked about that. We should have politicians that are good men, not just good politicians. But the job actually matters. If we're saying that a celebrity should be president, then we've clearly forgotten that this job matters, because we've had buffoons running this job, and we're like, this job doesn't really matter. They're just kind of like a figurehead, almost like it is over in England. Like, no, it's an important job. Like, the CEO of a company matters if the company matters. And when people are now scrambling about what to do because they want to have a candidate who they like. The question is, are Republicans more reasonable now than the Democrats? I don't think they've always been. I was born in 1982. So in the early 2000s, under like W. Bush, pushing things like the Patriot Act, pushing things like Christian morals. Now, I am a Christian. I don't talk about it super often. It's a very personal thing for me. But that is separate from my understanding of this country, that I do believe in religious freedom. And you can make the choices. I believe in free will. I believe in allowing people to make the decisions about how they want to live their life and about love, because if it's not a decision, then it's not legitimate. But I do think that the Republicans are more reasonable, and I can say this for a couple of reasons. One is when it comes to critical social justice stuff. I think that's one thing where there's really goofy things, and you can play language games, and you can essentially try and change things when it comes to like, gender and when it comes to race and stuff like that. But a lot of it is unreasonable. And there is a vacuum for reason. And I think the Republicans see it as an opportunity to kind of fill in that gap. And it's so crazy to me that I would say that Donald Trump seems more reasonable than the Democratic Party right now. But a lot of the things that he says, it does. When they were asking him, like, who do you want to win the war in the Ukraine? Do you want Ukraine or Russia? And he said, I want people to stop dying. I want the war to end. That is a reasonable thing to say. It's a reasonable thing to say. Okay. Where Biden would say something like, Ukraine will win this. And we need to take down Putin. Like, how does Russia lose? You know what I mean? Like Russia's not just gonna be like, okay, we lose. They are the biggest nuclear power on the planet. Okay. So, are the Republicans more reasonable? I think I'm reasonable. I'm sure everyone thinks they're reasonable. I think I'm reasonable, at least in my approach. Okay. Because I do believe in critical thinking. I do believe in challenging my own ideas and stuff like that. During COVID, I think that the conservatives were more willing to hear out alternative perspectives on things like ivermectin, perhaps like the vaccine dangers and stuff like that, things along those lines. I think the conservatives were more willing to hear that stuff. The left, which has always been against corporate, power, all of a sudden were shills for big pharma. It was a weird switch. And it seems like a lot of it's because of propaganda. People fall into propaganda. And there's a George Orwell quote, I believe, that's easier to fool people, or it's easier to fool people than to convince people that they've been fooled. And no one wants to believe that they're falling into propaganda, but the propaganda is corporate media companies and stuff like that. It's really, really strong. When all the stuff was going on about CRT, like in 2021, I was one of the only public-facing classroom teachers that was speaking out against critical race theory. And I knew a lot about critical race theory. I studied it a lot. Derek Bell and Kimberly Crenshaw and everything like that. I read books on it. And I really got the handle of it. I had James Lindsay on this podcast and had some conversation with him publicly about it, who, regardless of what you think about him and his approach, like, he knows this stuff really, really well. And CNN didn't reach out to me. MSNBC didn't reach out to me. Who did? Fox News. Fox News sent a van to my house. I went out and was on Fox News Tonight on Shannon Bream's show. Glenn Beck brought me on his show to talk about it. It was the conservatives that reached out that said, hey, tell us what your thoughts are on critical race theory. What's interesting is when I was on Fox News, they wanted me to just say how it's terrible. They just wanted me to say how the critical race theory is all nonsense. I was on a panel with some people that were like, it's all nonsense. And I was like, wait a second, it's not all nonsense. A good example of how critical race theory is not nonsense is the war on drugs. If you don't know, real quick, the critical race theory is this idea that you put on lenses to look for racism where there may or may not be racism. You look for racism everywhere. And it was done in like Harvard Law School to look at law and say, is racism baked into this law, even though it's not overt, it's not like on the front, it's not front facing. And the war on drugs, if you look at Nixon advisors, and you look at John Ehrlichman, and you look at the mass incarceration, you look at stop and frisk, you look at the way that like jail time and stuff is given out, there is a difference between white and black citizens. Okay, so you could say that from the design all the way up to the implementation, that there's racism baked into the war on drugs, and I do believe that. So what you do is you go, wait a second, there might be racism with the war on drugs. Even though it just says the war on drugs, there might be racism. So you look at it, you identify it, and then you take those lenses off and you go, all right, is there actually, you take the critical race theory lenses off and you start doing a deep dive. So I don't think critical race theory is nonsense. I think it can be a great tool, but it's not the only tool. It's not the only lenses you use. And the problem is a lot of times people who are critical race theorists, let's say individuals like, Nicole Hannah-Jones, Ibram X. Kendi, people like that. Those people keep those lenses on all the time, and they look for racism everywhere, and they assume that racism is everywhere, whether it is or isn't. They never take the lenses off and then put on different lenses to try and go through the process of critical thinking to try and prove themselves wrong, which is really how we get to truth. So So when that was happening, it was all right-wing sources that were willing to bring me on. The only left-wing source, if you want to call it that, that brought me on to talk about critical race theory was Black News Tonight, Mark Lamont Hill. Mark Lamont Hill is brilliant. He's really, really smart. I disagree with him on stuff, but he's really smart. He had Peter Boghossian and James Lindsay on to talk about it, and he could hang. Mark Lamont Hill is not intimidated by critical thinking. He has strong beliefs, some beliefs that I really disagree with, but he is willing to go toe-to-toe, which I think is rare among people of the left. And he's the only one that reached out to me. He's the only one that I went on his show. So it's really interesting that me, who was a registered Democrat when I lived in Pennsylvania, I moved out to California and registered as an independent, always aligned with the Democrats, always aligned with the left, but now seem to be more accepted in the way that I approach things by the right. Now, I am critical of the right. I'm critical of Republicans. I'm critical of Donald Trump. I'm critical especially of conservative Christians, which I'm a Christian, but I am highly critical of them. You know, I mean, Jesus was very critical of the Pharisees, the religious leaders, you know, so I'm critical of people like Matt Walsh, people like that. You know, maybe Charlie Kirk, people like that. But the Republicans overwhelmingly have accepted me more. And along those lines, something very interesting occurred is the delegation and the Republican Party from the state of Utah invited me to go to the Republican National Convention, which is from the 15th to the 18th, I believe. And they made it very easy for me to go. And I balked at it. I was like, should I go to this convention? You know, I'm going to get labeled a MAGA person, as I already do. You know, I get labeled a woke teacher in Los Angeles and a MAGA supporter, even though I've never voted for Trump. I've never voted for a Republican president. I voted locally Republican because I'm in Los Angeles, and I believe the balance is off. If I was a mechanic in Alabama or something like that, I would probably vote more left because I'm surrounded by a whole bunch of right-wingers in a right-wing state. But now I'm in education in California. I'm surrounded by a whole bunch of left-wingers in a left-wing state, and my paradigm is like, oh, the balance is really off. So I do vote locally, or I have voted locally for some Republican positions, but I've never voted for a Republican president. And now I'm going to the National Convention where they're going to nominate a Republican president. So people can label me whatever they want. They already do, okay? But I'm going to this Republican convention, and I don't know exactly what to expect, but I'm going in with a very open mind to hear people out. You know, I had Daryl Davis on the podcast twice. If you're not familiar with Daryl Davis, you haven't listened to the podcast, please listen to him. He is a Black jazz musician, awesome guy, brilliant guy, talented musician who befriended people in the Ku Klux Klan. He met people in the Ku Klux Klan. Instead of running away, he befriended them. He went to Klan rallies and everything like that. And through his relationship and his friendship, he got them to change their ways. And they gave up the life. Over 300 people gave up the life of being a neo-Nazi or being a Ku Klux Klan member because of his friendship. And I do think that I can have a positive impact on people in the GOP. I do. I think that I can promote more critical thinking. I can promote more, you know, better PR, you know, more kindness, more softness of heart. Grace and truth, as they would say, you know, not just truth, which is what a lot of Republicans say, but grace and truth. So I'm going to this convention and I'm going to go with an open mind. I don't really know what to expect, but even just as a civics teacher, I think to see how this all works, talk to donors, talk to people who hold government positions and stuff. I think it's a really great opportunity just as a civics teacher. I've been a civics teacher for a long time to kind of pull back the curtain and see what's really going on. And that's happening. I would love to go to the Democratic National Convention. I would love to talk to Democrats too, but they're not inviting me. So you go where you're welcome. I can't force my way into the Democratic National Convention. I wouldn't want to. I wouldn't want to go to the Republican one, but they were so friendly. They made it so easy. They floated a lot of costs for me and stuff like that. They really want me there. They see value in me. And if people see value in what you're doing, especially what I'm doing in education, it's out there. It's different. But the people that see value in it, those are my people. It's always been like that. Like, it's like my students over the years, who are your favorites, the ones that buy into what I'm doing, who understand what I'm doing. A lot of people don't understand what I'm doing. I'm searching for truth. That's what I'm doing. I'm trying to figure things out in real time, taking a lot of risks. I fail a lot. I screw things up all the time. But that's what I think education is all about. So the people who get what I'm doing, those are my people. And the GOP in the state of Utah seems to really understand what I'm doing. So I can't wait to go out there and experience it. But if you have connection, if you're like, oh, Will's just going to the Republicans, he's a covert Republican or something like that. I'm not a member of the Republican Party. I don't know. Maybe I will be. Who knows? Okay. But then have the Democrats invite me. Bring me on Anderson Cooper so I don't just go on Glenn Beck. Why won't they? You know, there's something to that I think can't be ignored. So I'm going to the convention, and I'm going to be, sharing my experience there and everything like that. And I think that it's a really valuable opportunity. And at the very least, I can share my take on it in a very honest way. But trying to make sense of what's happening right now, it's a very pivotal point in this country. It's odd. It's an odd time, and everyone kind of feels it, like this tension in the air. That's a really odd time for this country. The people who are running for president, the way that there's so much information now, because of the internet and stuff like that. There's so much information that it's really hard to bamboozle everybody. You could when there were only like a handful of newspapers and a handful of television channels or whatever it is. But now there's so much. So it gets people thinking. Now you have to be able to sort out the nonsense from the good stuff, because there's a lot of flat earthers now. Maybe Earth is flat. I don't know. But there's a lot of nonsense information, but there's a lot of good information too. And the people who sow the narratives have a lot of challenges. They have more challenges than they've ever had. So that's causing a lot of chaos in society because people don't know what is true. Moving forward, I'm going to be doing regular podcasts talking about what's happening in society. And I'm going to be facilitating conversations on the topics that I cover in these podcasts in Patterdox at the Patterdox Roundtable, which should be up and running soon. And if you've been following along with what I'm doing and you're aligned and you believe in it, I would love to include you in that membership, in that group, so we can have some conversations and kind of build a coalition of the reasonable to try and sort through what's real and what's not. And there's so many people out there that have unique experiences and stories and expertise that we can all work together to try and sort through what is real and what is not, because that is what's needed right now. We don't know what's going on and we're kind of lost, but we know that something's up. A lot of us feel like we're in that, like a Twilight Zone episode where the world is all different, but you're the same. It's like Bill Maher talks about that. He's like, I haven't changed. The world has changed. Yeah, there's a lot of people that feel that way. And I'm going to be using my platform. So whether it's Instagram and social media, this podcast, and then, over to Patterdox, I'm going to do, a bit of an exodus to Patterdox. So I have control, real control over censorship, trolls, stuff like that. To try and sort this all out. And I believe that the approach that I've taken in the classroom, the approach that I've taken on social media and everything like that is the best way forward. So I'm very, very excited to be sharing that with all of you. Stay tuned. Reach out to me on Instagram. That's the main platform that I use. It's just my name, WILLREUSCH. And we can start to work together to try and make sense of this. And we're going to disagree. It's not about all being in agreement. It's about disagreeing better and disagreeing shoulder to shoulder to try and move forward to getting to what's actually going on, because the country is at a pivotal point right now with our debt, with wars, with the way that the corporatization of and control of the government, all this kind of stuff. I feel like we're at a tipping point for this nation, and we could either collapse, which is terrifying, or we can come through this better. And the way we're going to come through this better is with the same Enlightenment principles that we are founded on. And I would love to be a teacher, not saying I have all the answers, but saying this is the process. This is the process that we have. I'm a social science, I'm a government, I'm a history teacher, that I can help guide us through this as I make mistakes and you make mistakes, guide us through forward to try and sort out what is real and what is not. And I'm going to take some shots, and then you can shoot me down and say, here's why you're wrong. And we can all grow and learn together. So thank you for listening to this first Will Reusch podcast, to make it more simple. Still cylinder radio idea, still viewpoint diversity, but changing the brand a little bit. And things are going to change, as I've been in the classroom for the past 6 years and doing the podcast on the side, doing social media on the side. But now I'm really furthering the mission of critical thinking, of making sense of things, of bettering education far and wide. And that is education for young ones, and it's education for we adults. So thank you so much for listening. If you're watching this on YouTube, I have a YouTube channel. Same thing, just my name, Will Reusch. Please subscribe, and I'll be putting more and more stuff up on YouTube, so I'm not all my eggs in one basket of Instagram. I think that's dangerous. I don't want to give all my power to Mark Zuckerberg and Meta, especially after everything that's been revealed through the Twitter files and everything in these congressional hearings about the way that they throttle channels and stuff. Because I do think that critical thinking and the pursuit of truth is a threat to people who are in positions of power that want to control narratives. So thank you guys so much for listening, and I will see you on the next one, covering a whole bunch of new topics. And also I have a bunch of guests coming up that I'm really excited to share. So thank you guys so much.